Thanks. Morning. First of all, I wanted to thank Sheldon for getting me involved in this and for all the volunteers that make the convention what it is. It's remarkable how this thing goes off every year with absolutely no flaws, and I'm sure it's just an easy job and takes no problem, right? No. Okay, as he said, I have been collecting illegals for about 10 years. In that time, I have researched a lot, and there's actually a lot of information out there if you look. A lot of the records will have, raids on clubs. A lot of books will have sections on illegal gambling. What you're going to find is, for Galveston, for instance, Galveston, Texas, was big on illegals. But you get a book on Galveston, and it could be 500 pages, and you get, 100 pages on the hurricane that, destroyed the city, and then you'll get like 10 pages on illegal gambling. And that's what I have. I have just a whole room full of books, but maybe 3% of all those books have illegal gambling in it. But there's actually a lot of information out there. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to focus on a few areas, and then I'm going to focus on just a few clubs in each area and kind of give you a little look at some of the chips. What I tend to collect most are chips, obviously. I collect matchbooks from illegal clubs, postcards. Really, I collect anything. From the illegal clubs. And what I've done here is I've shown a few of the things, and I'll go through some of the collectibles I have and kind of show you what kind of information there is, what kind of information out there. So if you want to go forward one. First of all, a lot of mystery on really what illegal means, and this is kind of my version of it. An illegal club means, first of all, it was unlicensed for gaming. And the reason I don't say that it was illegal in the area to have gaming is sometimes even Las Vegas has illegal gambling in it, or it did at sometimes, because if you don't have a license for it, it's illegal, but it's legal in the area. So what I say is if it doesn't have a license, there's wagering involved, and you're winning a gain, either financial merchandise. A lot of these places had slot machines that you could win cigarettes or something in. And, I consider that illegal gambling because it wasn't licensed for it, and they're making money on it. So that's kind of my criteria. A lot of people will say that, they don't think, something was illegal if it, doesn't have this criteria. It's really your call. I mean, a lot of I actually consider the fraternal, the Elks, and all that kind of stuff to be illegal just because they're not licensed for gaming. But there's a lot of people that say, well, no, it's just, good old boys sitting around gambling with each other. That's, shouldn't be illegal. So it's really, you gotta put your own definition to it. You go forward. Here's just an example of a few things that you have. Obviously, chips. That's pretty much what everyone collects for the most part. There's some beautiful illegal chips. A lot of people think, well, illegals are these hot stamped, just initial chips that are kind of ugly. This one is actually the Kentucky Club from Covington, Kentucky. Thank you, Mr. Covington. And it's a beautiful die-cut inlay chip. Those are some of my favorites. They're just absolutely beautiful. Matchbooks, I started collecting those, and it's incredible the amount of information you can get off a matchbook. And I mean, this is from the Riviera in New Jersey, and a lot of them will have, even a picture of the club. They'll have addresses. They'll tell you, what they had dining. This is when they were open. A lot of them will have the owner's name on them. Some of them out in New Orleans actually tell you what kind of games were being played there, which is kind of bold for the fact that it was illegal, but no one really cared. Dice, I do collect dice. These, I actually did not have a scan of any of my dice, so I actually pulled this off eBay, and I don't even know what this is a dice of, just for a picture. And dice, I don't think tell as much of a story about the illegal club. I mean, you know that, well, they had craps, or they maybe had a birdcage, a chuck-a-luck or something, but it doesn't say as much about a club, or what kind of, doesn't tell the story as much as some of the other things. But I do collect them because I'm a hopeless collector. And postcards. Actually, it's incredible that these clubs had postcards, but most of them were supper clubs, or this is actually the Belvedere Club in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And the information you're going to get off it is usually just photographic. You're not going to get a whole lot of information off a postcard, but it's always nice to see what a club looked like, because most of these places don't exist anymore. So it kind of gives you a little feeling about what the place was like. You can go. I just listed a couple other things here. I've got dozens and dozens of tokens that were used probably in slot machines. Maybe they were used for 50 cent. A lot of them were, they'll say 5 cents in merchandise or something. You don't want to say, 5 cents on the craps table, because that's, not very smart. A lot of these places, they have menus. I've got dozens of menus from Galveston clubs, the famous Balinese Room. And again, that's not an item that tells you a lot about the club. It tells you what kind of food, and you could get a steak for 75 cents in a lot of these places. But the restaurant-related items, these are things that you think, who the heck collects napkins and forks? I've got silverware that's monogrammed, and it's just, yeah. I mean, it's anything that most of these places. I mean, they weren't. None of these places were like just a casino where you just walked in and you didn't have just a casino. You had to have a front of something. I mean, you had to at least pretend like you weren't gambling. So I mean, a lot of these places had restaurants in the front, or a club or something. And actually, I put this here. I was going to scan a few things. It's funny. Records. I've got 3 records that were recorded at the Beverly Hills Country Club in Kentucky, and I've got one from the Balinese Room too. And it's just funny because live from the Balinese Room, we've got some big band playing, and it kind of gives you a little feel of the place, and you can hear the crowd, and it's just another one of those things. You say, well, I collect records from illegal clubs, and that's very weird. But there's really, I mean, anything that's casino related, obviously there's going to be a collectible out there. And one thing I didn't put on there, other thing I collect is just information, which is, old magazines, or newspaper articles, or just anything. I mean, I've got drawers full. I keep saying I'm going to just scan everything, PDF it, put it on a disk, and just have a research tool out there. But then I open up a drawer and there's nothing but paper in there, and you think, God, it's just you just can't catch up. Someday. Okay, so what I'm gonna, here's just a few places. These are some of the big places. Now almost every state had illegal gambling. And there's some places on here, or some places that aren't on here, that had huge time gambling. But this is what I'm going to just hit on today, a few things. Galveston, Texas, Newport, Saratoga, Hot Springs. I mean, we'll go through all these. But, one thing, wherever your hometown is, they almost definitely had some kind of illegal gambling at some time. And a lot of times you can find chips. Some of the, these big time places usually had chips that had their own, they had their own chips. A lot of these places just had generic things, or even the smaller places just use cash. And So there's not always a lot of collectibles to find with it, but there's always history involved. So if you're fascinated by it, like I am, I mean, I would encourage everyone to just go out and just see what you can find, especially these places that were from the 30s and 40s. The people are disappearing, and sometimes the people is all that you have left of the clubs because there isn't any advertising out there. So I'd encourage everyone to, find out what you can as soon as you can, and as soon as you lock into someone, get everything you can out of them. Okay, you can go forward. One thing with today, if you guys got questions, just go ahead and just give them to me, because I really don't know how long this is going to take. I don't think it's going to take very long, so I just encourage, if you have any questions, shoot them to me. Galveston, Texas. It's on the Gulf of Mexico, about 45 minutes outside of Houston, which is my hometown. So Galveston's very near and dear to me. I go down there all the time, and I love going to some of the old clubs. Now, this is actually a interesting postcard because it's for Galveston. You could buy it at any place, but right up here is one of the most famous clubs, the Balinese Room. And it's just kind of interesting that a postcard, just a generic postcard for Galveston, would have the Balinese Room, and then this is the Hotel Galvez that actually the owner here used to have the penthouse suite. He used to live there. But I just think that's kind of ironic that, here's Galveston, and this is an illegal club, but most people that buy this wouldn't know that. It's just a pier. So I love that postcard. All right. Really, the story of Galveston gambling starts and ends really with the Maceo family. Right here is, he's Salvador Sam Maceo, and he was called Papa Maceo, and he was they called him the godfather of Galveston gambling, but godfather kind of has a bad negative thing. The Maceos were really the friendly gamblers of Galveston. He and his brother, Rose Maceo, Rose isn't in here, but this is the whole Maceo family. They started as immigrants, came in from Italy. They were barbers, and they used to give haircuts for 25 cents out on the pier on Galveston. This is how they started. And one thing that happened for a lot of these gangsters was just the boom of Prohibition. And a couple guys that were what they called themselves the Beach Gang, Ollie Quinn and Dutch Voigt, who were very popular mobsters, came to Rose one day and said, we need you. You've got this beach house with this hidden piece underground. They say, we need you to hide 1,500 cases of booze. And Sam was, he goes, oh, all right, fine. So he agreed to it. He stayed up all night because he was scared to death of this. He was afraid he was going to get caught. They came the next day, picked him up, paid him $1 for each case that he hid. And he said, you know what? He said, why don't you keep that 1,500? I want to buy into your next shipment. So what happened is these Ollie Quinn and Dutch Voigt were so impressed with this guy, they said, okay. So they started a little bootlegging operation. The Maceos, of course, stopped cutting hair for 25 cents. They became bootleggers, and these guys decided that, well, you know what, we got all this booze, let's have it and serve it to someone. So they opened up a club called the Hollywood Dinner Club. And what they decided was, and this was state-of-the-art place. Nice and big. It had a lot of room inside. It was actually one of the first clubs to have air conditioning, which if you've ever been in Galveston, air conditioning is wonderful because it is humid and hot as can be. And when you're sitting inside a big place like this, that was huge. So they attracted all sorts of people, and actually, I've been told this matchbook actually got Sam in trouble because right here, down here, it says he's the proprietor, Sam Maceo. And when they found out that there was gambling going on, he got in trouble because his name was attached to this club. I've heard that. I haven't been able to confirm it, but someone had come to me and asked me if I had a matchbook because he was writing an article on it. And I never saw the article, but I sent him the matchbook. But anyway, so they opened up this club. They offered gambling, and what you have down here are 3 of the chips. There's actually a $1 chip that was found about 2 years ago. There's only been one found. It's sold on eBay for about $900. These are Crescent Seal, just beautiful chips. But the Hollywood Dinner Club was a huge success. And one thing that Rose Maceo, well, okay, you've got Sam and Rose Maceo are the 2 brothers. Sam was the social man. He was the guy that would bring in the big entertainment. Rose was the businessman. So what Sam did is he went out to Hollywood and he got all these entertainers to come in. Frank Sinatra, Sophie Tucker, Joey Lewis, Jim Dorsey, all these guys would come and play here. So this was the spot in Galveston, and these guys just made a ton of money. But one thing they did is they gave back to the community, and they discouraged any locals from coming in. They wouldn't let you in. If you were from Galveston, you couldn't gamble here unless they knew you and they knew that you were going to be able to afford it. And one thing you had back then is you had all the Houston oil that would come in, and the Houston oil men that money was no object. So that's where most of their stuff came from. Yeah.
Was like blacks allowed in the clubs, or?
I don't know that. I would guess not at this point.
What year are we talking?
Actually, the Hollywood Dinner Club opened 1926. So I would think that would be probably a little too early for that. Yeah. So with the success of the Hollywood Dinner Club, they were in business, and Dutch Voigt and Ollie Quinn were also partners in this. And the Maceos decided they were going to take over Galveston. So you can flip it. I'm sorry, this is one more. I love this postcard. It's actually an oversized postcard. It's big, and Phil Harris was the entertainer in Galveston. Everyone loved him. And I love this postcard. It's the Hollywood Dinner Club, and it's got Phil Harris, and it's all these guys. I just thought I'd throw that up there for the, Jack Benny. And it amazes me that these guys, put out postcards. I mean, So you can go.
I'm sorry, I'm just staring at the postcard.
Yeah. You can, okay. So what they decided was they were going to open their own clubs. And they had a few small clubs, but their crowning achievement was going to be what later became the Balinese Room. So what happened, in 1923, the Maceos first purchased, they had the Hollywood Dinner Club, but they bought this little place called the Chop Suey. And what this is a restaurant on a pier that's going out into the Gulf of Mexico. And I've been told that there was gambling at the Chop Suey. I tend to think there probably wasn't, because what happened is we know there was gambling at Maceo's Grotto because in 1928 it actually got busted for gambling violations. I think what I think happened is they bought the Chop Suey. They ran it just as a little club restaurant thing, and then when they opened up when the Hollywood Dinner Club started making money, then they started putting games over in the Maceo's Grotto. And this picture, it's not a postcard. I don't really know what this is. This is the only picture I've ever seen of Maceo's Grotto, and if you could see right up here on the top, is it actually an advertisement for the Hollywood Dinner Club. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that or not on this picture, but so this is the only picture I've ever seen of the grotto. So they changed it to in 1926. They changed it, and then in 1932, it was damaged by a storm, which is quite common in Galveston. It's actually remarkable that it hasn't washed away through any of the other hurricanes.
Is the Balinese room still there?
Yes, the Balinese room is still there, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. So in 1932, they redid it and opened it up as it's pronounced the Sui Ren Club. The Sui Ren Club was kind of a Japanese type decor. I mean, it was beautiful. They put this little tower up here. The chips these are my favorite chips out of anything. I mean, it's remarkable. The dragon on there, they're crescent seals. We know of a $1, $5, and the $100 chip, and the 25s are out there somewhere. We're almost positive they're going to be black because all the other Maceo 25s were black. We've just never seen them. If anyone's got them, come see me after, please. Yeah. And this lasted until 1941. And yeah, you can flip it. What happened and actually, I'm going to tell you in just a minute, it actually closed at the very end of 1941. The Balinese room actually opened in February of 1942, but they were renovating, so anyway, there's a couple months in between here. This was actually the crowning achievement of the Maceo's entire organization. This is the Balinese room. As you can see, here's the seawall, and the Balinese room goes all the way back, and then this is over water. This place does still stand now. In 1957, it was closed, and it just laid derelict there until, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago. Someone came in and renovated it. It's open now. I haven't been in there since it very first opened. Some of the other Houston guys may have, but they have a little gift shop in the front. I think there's maybe a restaurant club in the back and some shops, and it's a landmark, obviously. That's why they renovated it. They put a lot of money into it because obviously it's hanging over the side, and I had an opportunity to go in when before it was renovated, and you'd walk and there'd be holes in the floor and you could see the Gulf. I mean, you'd just walk around. So it was in bad shape, and someone came in and just took it over and really made a nice thing out of it. I mean, I doubt it's making any money. If you go back one, just real quick on. Here's just an example of some of the chips. These we know come from the Balinese room. We suspect that they're roulette chips. This design, I can't think of what that design's name is. Yeah, okay. I think there's 6 colors that we know about in there. There's actually I've got one monogrammed BR chip that's got the circle with the dots around it, whatever that one is. There you go. Look at that. And so I know that there's probably other designs. These are crescent seal chips. Nice. There's 2 different kinds of red, and there's 2 different. There's 2 different $100 and there's 2 different $500 chips. And then you have different versions of what their regular chips were. Now, TAC stands for the Turf Athletic Club, and that was kind of their corporation that they put together. The Balinese room was part of the Turf Athletic Club. They also had the studio lounge and the Western room that all have TAC on their chips, and TAC BR, TAC SL, and WR. Yes. The actual Turf Athletic Club was a different building, and the studio lounge and the The Western Room were on, believe, the second level of what they called the Turf Club, which had the Turf Grill in it. But what really made this a tough club to raid, and this was what their deal was the club was located in the back, the gambling. And down here you would have a huge corridor that the Texas Rangers would come in when they're raiding. They'd come through, start running, and by the time they were in the back, they had the walls that would, flip the slot machines over and hide them, and their craps table would flip over and become pinochle or something. And one tactic that they used was they would have, back in here was also a club that was just regular. That's where they have their entertainment. And when the Texas Rangers would come in, the band supposedly would strike up the Eyes of Texas. And all the Texans would have to stand and sing along, and that created havoc, and the Rangers would be slowed down. So by the time they got to the back, everything was gone. That's, and if you know Texans, you know that, that's the Eyes of Texas. You got to stand. So that was a good tactic. You can go for it. Here's just a few matchbooks. This is the decor you're going to find on most everything for the Balinese room. Again, here's your TAC, Turf Athletic Club. This is a more modern, I think this might have actually been after gambling had ceased. They tried to have just a little club or something that lasted not very long. But I just thought I'd throw those up. Actually, these are beautiful matchbooks too, because on the inside, they're the feature matchbooks, which have the paintings on the matches themselves, which are real nice. You can go forward. Now, what happened, and this is the story that I was originally told, was we know that it changed from Sui Ren to the Balinese room, and the change happened at the end of 1941, and it opened as a Balinese room in 1942, February 1942. The story went that they changed the name after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, because you don't want to have Sui Ren where, people say, well, why do I want to go to a club that's, endorsing Japan? And I was always kind of leery about that, but I actually picked up a menu, and on the back they have just, it's not the history of the Balinese room, but I think it's the history of the Bali culture or something. And at the bottom, it actually had this, which if you can't read it, it says, Bali is a possession of the Netherlands, one of the allies in the present struggle for democracy and for the right to live as free people. So that kind of tells me maybe there's some validity to that story, because they want to make sure that, because you go in and you say, well, what the heck's Bali anyway? Isn't that, kind of the same thing? But, they're making it very clear here that, no, we're changed. So I think that's interesting. I think that maybe truly that there's something to that story. Go for it. We're going to move now to Newport, Kentucky. Was there any questions on Galveston? Anybody? There were, dozens and dozens of clubs in Galveston, and the Macios either had a piece of it, or supposedly they were, the people who own the clubs had the permission of the Macios to do it. So they pretty much had a stranglehold on the whole city. But we're going to move now to Newport, Kentucky. I'm going to focus on really two sections here. Peter Schmidt is a character. He had a few clubs, and he had a whole lot of problems. The Cleveland Crime Syndicate, it was really the ones that ran the city. We're just going to take a quick look at just a few of their clubs. And I think I've got one more, but we'll see. So if you go forward. The Beverly Hills Club. This, Peter Schmidt, first of all, he was a local out there, and he was interested in getting into the casino business. He opened up the Beverly Hills Club, and it was very successful right off the bat. And of course, being successful, it attracted attention from the mob. And Daltz, part of the Cleveland crime syndicate, came in, and he was very impressed. And he said, all right, we want a piece of this. And Peter Schmidt said, no. He goes, no, I'm not interested in that. And he goes, huh, all right. So he left. Soon after that, club burns down. And there was actually one fatality in it. I think it was the innkeeper's daughter or something died. But Peter Schmidt said, okay, well, and he rebuilt it, and he opened it back up in 1957. He renamed it the Beverly Hills Country Club. And the mob still wanted in because it was still successful. So he said, no, you know what, I'm going to hire my own police force. So he hired a bunch of strong men, came in. They were bullied around. He said, okay, well, maybe I'll, hire someone else. So he tried to bring in the Toledo mob. Toledo mob came in and said, we don't want to mess with these guys. No, we're not going to do that either. So finally, Peter Schmidt gave up and said, okay, you can have the club. In 1950, he signed it over to Cleveland mob. They took over. Supposedly some of the stories behind there, Frank Sinatra used to go there a lot. He supposedly lost $30,000 in one night gambling. The mob came in and they made it just a fortress. They built a separate power plant to go with it. They had freezers that were filled with food. They had electronic surveillance equipment, which was kind of significant for back in the 50s, and it was a successful club. So Schmidt decides, well, I'm going to build another club. So he goes out and Peter Schmidt builds what he calls the Glen Rendezvous, and he names it after his son, Glenn. Of course, it becomes popular, so the Cleveland syndicate comes in and says, well, we want a piece of that. And, he refused. One thing that this place was known as is a bust-out joint. So the games may have not been on the level, but, yeah, and that really infuriated the Cleveland mob because they wanted clean games. They didn't want to have a reputation in the town as having crooked games. So anyway, they come in, they're fighting with him. He decides that he's going to bring in the Eastern Syndicate, Peter Schmidt. So he brings in the Eastern Syndicate and says, okay, well, now I've got some muscle behind me. Well, what happens soon after that, one of the partners in the Eastern Syndicate winds up dead, and very suspicious circumstance. So they say, forget it, we're out of here. We don't need this kind of. So, of course, Peter Schmidt has to give it up. And he gives it up. The syndicate comes in, and they change it to the Tropicana Club. And soon after, I don't know soon after that, but I know after that it kind of mysteriously burned down. I don't know. Here, some examples, some chips. These chips, I think, are maybe a little suspect. I don't know. They're supposed to be from there, but we'll never find out with those BC Wells chips. You can go. So Peter Schmidt decides, all right, we've done this twice. I'm sorry, what?
The top left was also suspect.
If you go back.
One was triangle.
Oh, is it?
Very trap says that.
Really? Okay, well, there you go. All right. No, it's I hadn't heard that, but I'll believe him. Yeah, I'm suspect of a lot of chips. I don't know about that bottom one either. Who knows? I assume the hub mold someone's looked at, but anyway. Okay, you can go for it. So, Peter Schmidt opens up what he called the Platorium. And what this was, first of all, it cost $700,000 to build. It was a restaurant, a bar, a bowling alley, and it also was a casino. And one thing at this point, obviously the syndicate wanted in again. So he refuses. And what they end up doing is, at this point, most of the police were on the syndicate side. They were getting well paid. So he just set up the syndicate set up raid after raid on this place. And one thing that was surprising was this was actually a successful place without the casino as well. I mean, it was making money on all this other stuff. But it was kind of distracting when you were just having police come in constantly shutting it down, and all the patrons, well, I'm not going bowling or we get arrested. So what he ended up doing is he built an attachment off to the side. He called it the snacks bar, and that's where he had his casino action outside. And I've never seen any chips that someone had said they were the snacks bar. I've seen dice. So I know that, there's something out there. And again, I'm pretty sure we're good with that chip. This one, I don't know. If you guys, you like that one?
Yes.
All right, then that one's good.
There's different colors in them.
Yeah, and actually this place, Peter Schmidt was actually able to hold on to it. He was harassed throughout the whole time, but he actually had ownership of this until the day he died. So it was a tough road, but he held on, and it was remarkable. And I'm surprised that he lived as long as he did for putting up such a fight. But he was an interesting guy. So you can go. The Cleveland Syndicate, again, here's Mo Doutz. He kind of ran the whole syndicate. They had a whole bunch of clubs there. They ruled the city, and they actually had good, they had, it was a good game. It was a clean game. So, you can say what you want about them. It's, just like Vegas. They were given a product, and it just happened to be illegal, but it was fair. So we'll go forward. We'll take a look at the Lookout House. Let me get my stuff in order here. Lookout House goes way back. Actually, the original house was built over a slave underground railroad. And there were always stories about ghosts and all sorts of things. The casino was first started by a guy named Jimmy Brinks, and here he is. There's a lot of these oversized matchbooks with his picture. A lot of information on here. Again, the paddock bar. If you turn yourself on your head. Here's the bar, or here's a picture of the club, a couple chips, nice looking chips. These were actually, originally they were misidentified as, I think, the Beacon Inn or something is what everyone thought, Beacon Club. And someone finally had the sense to pull the records, and we found out that they were actually to the Lookout House, the Lookout House Club. And the casino had it all. It had roulette, blackjack, craps. It had a chuck-a-luck cage. In 1938, there was an injunction against it for gambling, but of course they had enough juice that it was just never enforced. They never had to close down. Never any problems with that. The Cleveland Syndicate, of course, came in. They asked Jimmy Brinks if they could buy it, and he had the sense of mind to say sure. And they actually, he was actually very well treated. He was able to keep 10% in the Lookout House. They gave him actually 10% of the Beverly Hills Country Club and paid him $125,000 cash, which was a remarkable amount of money back then. So he was. If you want to call him smart, he was smart. He's not going to deal with, what old Peter did. The place was very successful. It ran until the 1952 Kefauver hearings came in, and they found out about the Lookout House. They raided it, and investigators and police pulled out all sorts of equipment and just burned it. And there's 20 grand worth of equipment that they just out there and made a spectacle of it and burned it. Yeah, it's pretty sad when you think about it. Okay, you can go. Another place, the Merchants Club. This was actually the headquarters for a guy named Red. He was the enforcer Masterson. His job was to go around and kind of muscle people, and he closed down the bust-out joints. And he was the their tough man, and this was his joint. Peter Schmidt actually, of course, the enforcer would hassle him. Peter had just a few people in the police, so he actually had him raid this place a few times. But nothing much comes of it. Just a nuisance more. A lot of stuff you get for gambling. What you'll find is a lot of these horse kind of bookie joints. Again, I can't quite see what that. I think we're pretty sure that these chips are good. That's probably all right, but I'm always skeptical of these monogram chips. But again, I love these matchbooks that have all sorts of information on them. I just love them. Okay. The Yorkshire Club. This was the Cleveland Syndicate's biggest sports book. They had taxes on this place of $200,000 a month, which, if you think about it, is a lot of money because it's probably, that's what they're actually telling the IRS. So I'm sure it was probably quite a bit more. Interesting story about the Yorkshire Club was a guy named Rip Farley. He decided that he had enough juice because his brother was in the Eastern Syndicate. He decides he's going to go in, brings a gun, and robs this place for $25,000. Pretty gutsy move. He comes out and says, "You can't touch me. I've got family in the mob." Well, it didn't work. They were targeted. He and his brother were actually shot. Rip was killed. His brother was wounded but survived, which, of course, infuriated the Eastern Syndicate. So the Cleveland Syndicate decides, well, okay, we'll make it right. And they went out and they executed the executioners. So it was like a double hit. His brother ended up surviving, and everyone kind of kissed and made up, and that was the end of that story. But that's one of the interesting stories. I just don't understand what people are thinking, that they go in and rob a mobbed up joint. That's nuts. Okay, the Flamingo Club. This was actually not an Eastern Syndicate place. This place, or not a Cleveland Syndicate. This was an Eastern Syndicate, was allowed to come in, and they had this one club, and they kind of had a little understanding that we're allowed to have this one club. So it was actually, it operated, and it was called the 633 Club. That was the address. The chips say 633. It was actually the Flamingo Club. These are real nice. I love these matchbooks. You can't really see it that well, but there's nice pictures, flamingos, and a lot of information on there. One funny story about this is this club got busted for having liquor, and there was a secondary raid that happened, and they were going to go. They were put on probation for having liquor, and they said, okay, we're going to catch these guys and act. Well, before the cops got there, these guys were tipped off. By the time the cops got to the club, they had taken out all the liquor bottles, replaced it with flower pots, and they were all sitting at a table all by themselves in the middle of this room drinking milk. And the cops show up and just, it's kind of just take that type thing. Who says these guys don't have a sense of humor, right? How are we doing on time? All right, we're almost done. Saratoga Springs. This is a vacation spot that attracted a lot of attention. It had a lot of casinos. I actually think there's two different sections. You got the classic years and you got the mob years. And if you can go, the classic years are made up of the clubhouse, and this place was originally built. Let's see, back in the 1860s. It was originally built at a cost of $170,000, which is a remarkable amount of money. It was built by a guy named John Old Smoke Morrissey, who was the heavyweight champion back then. He won the heavyweight championship, I think, in the 37th round, and that's when you really fought back then. This guy was tough. He had moved out to California to look for gold, decided he didn't like digging for gold, so he opened these faro clubs and just took the gold from the guys who worked. So he was very smart, very good gambler. He comes to Saratoga, and he says, I'm going to build this place. And it was classy. It was nice. I mean, tuxedos and just a remarkable place. He didn't allow any women in the club. He didn't allow any credit on the books. Only person that could get credit was Cornelius Vanderbilt, which I don't think there was ever any problem paying off. And Morrissey ended up dying in 1878, and the club it passed some ownerships, and it actually declined until 1893 when Richard Canfield, a big gambler, came in. He renovated it, and if you flip it, he built these gardens in the back that was a huge attraction. They had, fountains, and I mean, this was a huge expense, but it was all, budgeted out of gambling. I mean, it was just a beautiful place. Finally, this place closed in 1907. There was some problems with the locals decided that they didn't like gambling. They closed it down. Canfield said, "The heck with it, I'm just going to move." So they closed it down. You can flip it. What happened is then there was kind of these little clubs that happened for the next couple decades. But then in the 30s, the mob comes in. And they decide that they're going to, not really the mob. The clubs changed. It went from upscale gambling to these local guys that were kind of tough guys that came in. They renovated a lot of these lake houses that were vacation spots, and they built casinos in the back room. And actually, this right here was a kind of a club area, and off to the back, I think right back here was where the casino was. This was a Delmonico's restaurant, world famous. Supposedly Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano had a piece of this place. The real owner was the guy named Louis Doc Ferrone. They only opened in August for gambling. That's when the racetrack was open, and so it got a famous racetrack there. And so it was only open for 1 month. It closed down during World War II. It reopened 48, and then the Favre hearings came in, and they closed down. Doc Ferrone was convicted of illegal gambling, and the place pretty much shut down after that. One quick story. This place actually existed up into the 1990s. It's one of the few clubs in Saratoga that wasn't burned down. And they renovated it, and they had a one-night gala for some charity, and then they bulldozed it. I mean, they put all this money into it and then bulldozed, but it was supposedly just beautiful. I mean, they renovated and did this for one night. I'm sure there was some philanthropist that came in and thought they would do it. A couple chips here. These PJS are for Peter J. Sullivan. He ran some of the games. Riley's Lake House, of course. And you can go. Newman's Lake House, just another lake house. This one was built in the 1870s as a vacation place, but two locals, John and Gerald King, came in. They had gambling in it. It was just just another lake house. Here's the lake behind. There was some gambling. Gerald King here. Newman's Lake House. I love, this is one of my favorite matchbooks. I don't know why, it just looks nice, I think. Those guys, the Kings, then 1953, there was a crackdown. They were given probation and a $1,000 fine for gambling, but they said that was enough. The heck with it. You can go. The Piping Rock. Yeah, the Piping Rock is another place. This one was actually in 1932. Meyer Lansky came in, and this was the place he liked. He really ran this club. He brought in Frank Costello from the Copacabana in New York. Joe Adonis had some New Jersey clubs. He brought him in. And you got to remember, this is open for a month as well. This is all these clubs. I mean, this is everyone went to Saratoga in August. Entertainer. A couple stories. 1948, there was a crackdown, and they had to close for a couple weeks, and they had to pay entertainers $25,000 a week, even though they weren't entertaining. So you can tell what kind of budget these guys had. One quick story about something I learned about illegal gambling is I actually got a call from a woman who said my dad was a part owner in this club. And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "I've got some chips too." And I said, "Well, I'd love to talk to you." And I don't have a picture of the chips here, but they were kind of oversized chips, and they had Piping Rock Club and Saratoga, New York on them. Just beautiful. Well, I started talking to her. She goes, "What kind of information do you have on this club?" And I said, "Well, Meyer Lansky was a big owner in this." And she was just silent. She goes, "No." She goes, "My dad would never do business with the leader of Murder, Inc." And I said, "Oh, no, he was." And because she really wanted to know about it. She said, I don't know anything about it. My dad never talked about it. And it's just, that was it. That was the end of the conversation. It was 2 years later, and this was through email, of course, and I kept emailing her every month or so. I'd drop her an email, and finally, after 2 years, she answered me again. And I learned a lesson there is, these daddy doing business with gangsters, having a club is kind of fun, but you got to be careful what you do with people. I mean, some of these stories they don't want to talk about, and I learned a very important lesson on that. I did. I got one set of chips for me. Now she said she had like more. She had like a bag of them, and I was like, well, I'd love to have some. Well, we're gonna keep them. We don't, So I keep figuring they're gonna show up on eBay or something, and I don't know, or just thrown out. Someone will throw them out thinking they're worthless. Okay, you can go. We'll go through Hot Springs, Arkansas, real quick. Actually, Hot Springs goes way back, the 1870s. Gambling, it was accepted as long as there was no trouble in the town. They had a few problems with a couple shootouts in the streets that every time that would happen, they'd kind of clamp down a little bit. But for the most part, Hot Springs was kind of a neutral area. And a lot of gangsters would vacation there, and they kind of were under the understanding that we could all go there and we could all just get along. And this was actually a famous place that the Kefauver hearings came in, and I think Joe Valachi, yeah, he's the one that this is where they caught up with him, and he ended up telling everyone about. The whole mob scene. So it was, Hot Springs was a happening area. We're just going to hit a couple clubs real quick.
I saw a great old hotel there. I stayed there some years ago called the Arlington. Was that part of the illegal clubs? Because it just had that whole.
Yeah, I've never heard of any gambling there, but it's obviously a famous hotel in the area. But I know that we've never found any chips or anything from it, but okay, the Southern Club in 1938 it started out as a small club, but it was renovated. It was renovated with mob money. In the 1940s, actually, the place was the entire Hot Springs was taken over by the military because they were in all the hotels and they were, for the war. And so they kind of clamped down on things and they closed down some of the clubs. In 1951, Southern Club opened back up, but it was kind of never the same. You can, the Belvedere Club. Yeah, I like those chips. Let's see. The Belvedere Club was actually, it started out as a hub for illegal liquor. It was the kind of, you'd bring it in, store it here, and then bring it out, and they said, well, let's, start serving it here, and let's have some games. And Owen Madden was the owner of this club. It was very famous for a show theater, very popular. We can flip. Real quick, we'll go through New Orleans. Huey Long obviously kind of set the tone for all crookedness, and New Orleans is known for its corruptness. He was railroad commissioner, governor, senator, and he was a gambler. He was in on all the gambling. We can go. Carlos Marcello was kind of, he ran the whole town. He started off in slot machines. He moved in to a lot of these clubs, Beverly Country Club, Newport, the New Southport Club. This is the Jefferson Inn, and this is a Club Louisiana chip. Carlos was a neat guy. In 1951, the Favre hearings came in, and they questioned him, and he took the Fifth Amendment 152 times. And he was sentenced to 6 months in jail for his contentment, and he beat it on an appeal, didn't serve any time. 1959 came around. Robert Kennedy tried the same thing. He only took the Fifth 72 times there. And so he wouldn't talk. He was a neat guy. But one thing that they were clamping down on was this interstate of transportation of gambling equipment, and they had actually talked to the Mills brothers and slot machine, and they were actually going to build a factory out in Jefferson County, Louisiana, so they wouldn't have to do interstate. But by the time all those negotiations came around, it was over. Real quick, Illinois. Here, I just wanted to show a few chips. Obviously, most of the gambling was in the Chicago area. I think this is actually East Cape Girardeau. Yeah. Gerardo. Vernon Country Club. I love these chips. That's actually this is a plastic, and that's a die cut. Nice. We'll flip. We're just going to look at one club here, the Rock Garden Club. The story of the Rock Garden Club is this was an Al Capone place, and he decided that Chicago was not participating, was not letting him do what he wanted. So he was going to go out to the suburbs, and he took over the little town of Cicero, Illinois. He bought off the politicians, and this club was actually called the Ship when he first got there. But the story about this Cicero is he went in, election was coming around, and he was trying to get his guys in for the rest. And what happened is he hired his brother, Frank Capone, to handle the re-election, which kind of meant that he would go harass everyone who wasn't going to vote for their people. Well, the Chicago police found out. They sent in people. They found Frank on the street, and they say it was in self-defense, but they filled him full of bullets. He died. Al was, of course, horribly hurt by that. They ended up winning the elections, but, did you lose the war? You lost your brother. Anyway, they ended up taking over Cicero, but it was at a cost. Al Capone's brother ended up dying. And this is one of the more famous clubs. There was some booking action here. This says RG on there. That's an RG chip as well. These were newly discovered. It's an interesting story, but of course, you know, when you talk about Illinois, you're talking Al Capone for the most part. But there were a lot of people out there. It does 2131 South Cicero Avenue, and this was on the second floor. All these have the second floor on there, so that must have been where the actual club was. Florida, I don't have a lot of information on Florida. I put those up here. This is an Al Capone place. Beautiful crescent seal chips. If you want to know about the illegal, Mark Leiterman's book on illegals on Florida has a lot of illegal stuff, and as he's been telling me for years now, he's working on his third edition. I don't know if he's here, but I'm still waiting for it. No, he's not. Okay. Anyway, I would recommend his book. It's fascinating. Florida again was an area where a lot of the northern mobbed up places like Saratoga, and they came down here in the wintertime because, you know, why are you going to sit in Chicago in January if you don't have to? So they'd come down here. Al Capone would run his clubs here. Yeah, I've lived up north. I know. Okay, we can go. Real quick, Detroit was run by a group called the Detroit Purple Gang. They were given the name supposedly because they were purple like putrid, rotten meat, apparently, is what the story goes. They started out, they were street thugs during Prohibition. They really made their big money. Because of where Detroit was, right next to Windsor, Canada, they would get all their booze and come over the border, and they would take over. And they were ruthless. And actually, they didn't have a very good reputation because they were hijackers as well. They would take other people's booze, and they were just hoodlums. I mean, and they got into gambling, they got into prostitution, they ruled the town, and of course they were hired as mercenaries, and they controlled unions, and supposedly they only preyed on other gangsters though, and that was their thing. Is the police, you know, who was going to report a theft of a illegal shipment of booze? So I mean, that was supposedly their thing. They got in trouble. They killed a few people they probably shouldn't have, and they got busted for it. And the Purple Gang finally came down. A lot of these clubs in Detroit use their address. There's Chesterfield, that's an actual one, but I don't know that we actually have any club names for these. As far as I know, we call them, the 2715 Van Dyke Club, but I don't know. I mean, what we probably need to do is get a crisscross reference or something. Yeah.
21 West Elizabeth was a camp stand that picked up people and took them to a moving around crap game.
Cool. Well, there you go. I didn't know that. That must have been early, 20s or 30s? I mean, it's an old chip, I know. Okay. Now, just real quick, that's it for the history. Like I said, you've got them everywhere. I would, like I said, recommend you just looking in your area, and I think you'll find them. I just wanted to close a quick thing. Everyone, for some reason, thinks that I'm like the expert on pricing, and I hate that. I put out that price guide originally as kind of like an index, but it's turned into kind of a I don't like being a market maker. I hate that. But anyway, I just wanted to do just a quick thing on pricing. These chips, it was not a good chip to show. This is the Lookout House chip. It's a $25 chip, and these just came out. I think there was like one known before this year. These they came out on eBay. Of course, in my guide, it's expensive. There's only one known, and we know this chip is from the Lookout House. It's a famous club, hundreds of dollars, and of course it came out and it sold for I think $400 when it first came out. Well, of course the next week another one pops up, boom. So we're all emailing the guy saying, how many do you have? And I don't know. And, everyone comes back and says, well, what if there's only 5 or there's only 5 found? Isn't it still a $500 chip? No, well, no. The problem with illegal chips as opposed to Nevada chips is that there is a small group of people that collect them. 20 chips is going to fill almost everyone's collection. So, where you can find a box of Nevada chips and it hardly puts a dent in, well, I can't say that, I don't know enough about Nevada chips, but you're not killing the market. If you find a box of illegal chips, you're going to be sitting on 90 of them for the rest of your life. You're going to get rid of 10. I would just be cautious anytime you see a real expensive illegal chip up for sale. You got to think to yourself, the price is going to be affected, because really, I think you just need to be cautious, because like I said, these are now, every once in a while they'll still pop up, but the set price or the opening bid is $30 and it just doesn't sell anymore. And originally it sold for $400, then maybe $300. I think I bought it for $150 or something. Just be cautious that anytime you see illegal chips out there, or if you find a box of illegal chips, you're not going to end up getting a whole lot of money for it, because it's growing, and there are more people coming in it all the time, but it's certainly a completely different market than you're getting for Nevada chips, or maybe even Atlantic City. I'm not that familiar with it. But anyway, that's what I wanted to, I think that's it. Time is up. Thank you.